Joe Vane arranged a wife the way he arranged everything else in his life, with the minimum of ceremony and the maximum of practicality. He sent a letter to a German settlement agency in Santa Fe, 17 words long, written in a hand so spare it looked like it had been rationed. He wanted a woman who could cook on an open fire, carry water from a creek without complaint, and survive a New Mexico winter without requiring consolation. He did not mention that he was 29 years old and had not spoken to another human being, beyond grunting at his mule Absalom, in 11 months. He did not mention the mine. Nobody ever mentioned the mine. What arrived 6 weeks later on the Cimarron stage was not what Joe Vane had specified. Clara Hoffmann was 16 years old, a fact the agency had buried in the 7th line of its reply, with copper dark hair that refused to stay pinned, a jaw that looked like it had been quarried rather than grown, and an expression that suggested she had spent the entire journey from Albuquerque deciding exactly how disagreeable she intended to be. She stepped off the stage carrying a single canvas bag, a battered copy of Humboldt's personal narrative of travels in the equinoctial regions of America, and the absolute conviction that whatever this man had ordered, she had not come here to be it. She looked at Joe Vane standing in the road, at his sun-cracked boots, his $2 hat, his mule, and she said in German accented English so precise it sounded like a legal document, "You have dirt on your face. Is that usual, or are you making an effort?" Joe Vane had come to Colfax County in 1869 with a broken pickaxe, a surveyor's compass borrowed from a dead man, and a theory about the rock formation on the east face of Ute Park Mesa that nobody with any standing in the territory had the patience to hear. By 1872, he had a homestead of 240 acres that produced, in a good year, enough to keep him and the mule alive, and a loneliness so dense it had its own gravity. He had felt it pulling at him for 3 years before he admitted what it was. Clara Hoffmann was the third daughter of a Frankfurt clockmaker who had emigrated to the New Mexico territory and died of a fever before he could unpack his tools. She could cook on anything, read in 4 languages, set a bone, and argue in the dialect of a woman who had been making her own decisions since she was 12 years old. What Joe had not anticipated was that she had read Humboldt, all 4 volumes, and had opinions about volcanic sediment that were, as he would discover within 72 hours of her arrival, more accurate than his own. This story is just getting started. Subscribe now and follow every twist. New stories drop every single week. Hit subscribe, you will not regret it. On the 3rd morning, Clara set Humboldt's 3rd volume on the breakfast table, opened to a hand-annotated page, and said, "You have been reading the sediment wrong. The copper veining you described in your letter to the agency, I found a similar annotation in Humboldt. The primary deposit will not be where you have been digging. It will be 40 feet higher and 15 degrees north. I worked it out on the ride from Albuquerque. You are welcome." Joe Vane set down his coffee cup, slowly, the way a man sets something down when he is reconsidering everything that preceded the moment, and said, "I know." Clara looked at him. She had prepared arguments. She had rehearsed the full geological case. She had not prepared for a man who already knew he was wrong and had, apparently, been sitting with that knowledge like a stone in his boot for 3 years, waiting for someone to simply say it aloud. She had not expected someone quiet enough to hear her. "You know," she repeated, "and you have done nothing." He looked out the window toward the mesa. "I was waiting," he said, "for the right person to hold the second lantern." Without asking, Clara repitched the sluice channel Joe had dug at a 12-degree gradient, a gradient that sent water skidding past the gravel bed instead of through it. She worked alone, 2 mornings in a row before dawn. With a borrowed shovel and a surveyor's eye she had taught herself from one of her father's books. When the water ran clean and true through the channel on the 3rd day and the first color of mineral wash appeared in the pan, Joe stood at the lip of the trench for a long time and said nothing at all. The following Sunday, Clara came in from the creek to find that Joe had built, in her absence, a writing shelf against the east wall, angled at 17 degrees to catch the afternoon light exactly where she had been tilting her journal every evening, straining her neck without once mentioning it. He had used salvaged pine and 2 stolen barrel staves, and it fitted the wall like it had always been there. He was already outside with the mule when she found it. He did not look back. In October, a fever came for Clara without asking permission. She did not tell Joe. She tried to work through it the way she had worked through everything. Silently, on principle. On the 2nd night, she woke to find him asleep in the chair beside her bed, a damp cloth in his hand, Humboldt Volume 2 open in his lap, a passage on the thermal springs of Venezuela underlined in pencil. He had been reading, she realized, preparing, in case she woke and wanted to talk about something that was not the fact that she was frightened. In March of 1873, 6 months after her arrival, Joe Vane led Clara Hoffmann up the east face of Ute Park Mesa by a route that was not on any map in Colfax County, through a canyon so narrow their shoulders brushed both walls, to a fault line in the rock that opened, in the cold morning dark, into a chamber 30 feet deep and 40 feet wide, its walls threaded with copper and silver so dense the lantern light shattered into 1,000 directions at once. He held the lantern up and said, not proudly, but carefully, the way you say a thing you have held alone too long. I found it in 1870. I have not told another living person, not the land office, not the surveyor, not Absalom. He paused. I could not work it alone, and I did not want a partner I had not chosen. Clara stood in the middle of that chamber, 16 years old, 3 months married to a man she had been sold to, and standing in more wealth than her father's entire life had produced. And she understood, in the particular stillness of a person confronting a thing they did not expect to be moved by, that he had not brought her here to impress her. He had brought her here because he trusted her, perhaps before she had trusted herself. This channel lives for stories like this. Subscribe now. Every story is chosen because it should never be forgotten. Subscribe. Share this with one person who needs to hear it. They filed the claim together in Cimarron on the 14th of April, 1873. Clara Hoffmann Vane listed as co-holder, which the land office clerk had to rewrite 3 times because his form did not have a column for it. The witnesses were the postmaster, who had handled Joe's 17-word letter 18 months earlier, and a Jicarilla Apache trader named Huero Mundo who happened to be buying rope and found the whole proceeding so unusual that he stayed. The Vane Hoffmann mine, Clara insisted on the hyphen. Joe did not argue, produced copper and silver for 22 years. They did not sell it. They worked it themselves, with a crew of 7 that Clara interviewed personally. And Joe trained with the methodical patience of a man who had spent 3 years waiting for the right people. They built a proper house at the foot of the mesa in 1875. Clara designed it. Joe built it. The east wall had windows that caught the afternoon light at exactly 17 degrees. They had 3 children, Frederick, Isolde, and a boy they named after the valley, Moreno, who grew up to be a surveyor and never understood why his father's eyes went soft whenever he picked up a compass. Clara taught them Latin, geology, and how to read a rock formation from a moving horse. Joe taught them patience and the particular grammar of silence that means, I see you, I am here, you do not have to explain. Joe Vane died in 1901 at the age of 61, of a heart that had, as Clara told the doctor with remarkable composure, worked harder than its specifications for 30 years. He is buried on the east slope of Ute Park Mesa, where the copper seam comes closest to the surface, and where, on clear mornings, the light comes off the rock wall in exactly the way that first made him press his hand against it in 1870 and know that something extraordinary was hiding just beneath. Clara Hoffmann Vane lived until 1924. She is buried beside him. She outlived him by 23 years, spent 17 of them completing a geological survey of Colfax County that the New Mexico School of Mines published in 1919, and 3 of them writing a memoir that nobody published in her lifetime, and that was found in a trunk in Cimarron in 1961 by a librarian cataloging donated estates. He arranged a wife in 17 words. She arrived with a book and a verdict. And what they built together, the mine, the house, the children, the 22 years of shared silence and shared certainty, was better than either of them had ordered. Because the things worth having are never the things that arrive according to specification. They are the things that show up with their own compass and already know which wall the light comes through. Tell me, in the comments below, which moment in this story stayed with you longest. Was it the 17-word letter? The writing shelf built to catch afternoon light at exactly 17 degrees? Or the morning she stood in that mine chamber and understood that he had chosen her before she had chosen herself? I read every single comment on this channel. Everyone. Because the reason I keep making these is in those responses. In the proof that real human stories, told honestly, still land. If you want more stories about the people, the history books filed under wife of, or settler, or deceased, the ones who turned out to be the whole story, they are right here on this channel. Subscribe, hit the bell, bring someone with you. The next story is already waiting, and I promise you, it has a mind of its own.